The Buddha, the great teacher, he who altered the historical roots of human consciousness. He did not found Buddhism. Buddhism is a natural consequence, but he initiated an entirely different kind of religion in this world. He founded a religion beyond religion, initiated not just a religion but also a faith, and this is the greatest root change in the history of human consciousness. Before the Buddha, there were many religions, but they did not simply arise from spiritual factors. Humanity had not yet matured. When the Buddha appeared, humanity entered a phase of maturity. The entire human race had not entered that phase, that is the truth, but the Buddha drew the path. The Buddha opened the gates leading to this path. It takes time for humanity to understand that profound message. The message of the Buddha is the deepest message in this world. No one has done what the Buddha did in the way the Buddha did it. No one else has emitted that pure fragrance. The founders of other religions, the enlightened beings, compromised with their listeners. The Buddha did not compromise, hence he remained pure. He did not care whether you understood or not. He only cared about what is truth, what is reality. He spoke without worrying whether you understood or not. In a sense, this seems harsh, but if viewed differently, this is indeed compassion. The truth must be spoken in its original way. The moment you compromise, the moment you bring truth down to the normal human perception, truth loses its soul. It becomes fake. It becomes a dead object. You cannot bring truth down to human perception. Humans must be raised up to the level of truth. That is the great work of the Buddha. Part 1. Remember, a wife is not property. You can take a house, but how can you take a wife or husband? Languages express what is happening in the mind. We don't know how to give, how to abandon, how to let go, how to let things happen freely. Nirvana is always there. The Buddha takes away all these ideals, takes away the entire future, and ultimately takes away something that we find very difficult to relinquish: your ego, leaving behind pure, pristine emptiness. He calls this pure emptiness nirvana. Nirvana is not a goal, but rather the emptiness within you. When you abandon all that has been accumulated, when you no longer hoard, when you are no longer a miserly beggar, a clinging parasite, suddenly emptiness will arise. The Buddha does not teach you mysteries. The Buddha does not bestow nirvana upon you as an ideal. The Buddha gives you freedom instead of imposition. The Buddha teaches you how to live, not for any goal, not to achieve anything, but simply to enjoy blessings here and now, in this very moment. He teaches how to live in awareness, not in the sense that awareness will bring you something. Awareness is not a means to achieve something. It is itself the ultimate result, both a means and an end. Its value is intrinsic, it is inner. The Buddha does not teach you mysteries. This must be clearly understood. Human beings belong to this world, yet monks keep teaching about another world. That other world is not really mysterious. It cannot be mysterious because it is just a higher form of the world you are living in. How can you create another world? You only know this world. You can upgrade it, decorate it, remove some ugliness and replace it with what you consider beautiful. But this will be a product created from your experience of this world. Therefore, that other world is no different. It cannot be different. It is a continuity. It arises from your mind. It is the play of imagination. All scriptures talk about the path of meditation, and the meditation path in the scriptures is nothing but similar stories. It may be printed on artistic paper with better ink, using more modern printers with more colorful illustrations, but the story remains the same. It cannot be different. The Buddha does not speak of another world. He only teaches you how to be here, in this world, how to always be mindful, aware so that nothing can affect your inner emptiness, so that your inner emptiness remains unpolluted, uncontaminated, so that you can live here and still remain untouched, still pure, so that you can be in this world and this world is not within you. Mystical spirituality is stifling, destructive, full of suffering, in short, diseased. The spirituality of the Buddha brings it as of your existence diminishes. Therefore, the entire message of the Buddha is to be aware. Not for any reason, simply to be aware, because consciousness creates existence. Consciousness creates you. And it creates you in a way that is very different from your current self, from what you can imagine. It creates you where the I disappears, where there is no longer any idea of I, nothing shaping you, a pure emptiness, an endless emptiness. The difference between Buddhism and traditional religions. Nirvana is a unique concept in the teachings of the Buddha, describing the highest state of consciousness, which is liberation from all desires. The Buddha used this term, although it was not previously associated with any spiritual meaning. According to the Buddha, our self is like a flame fueled by endless desires. However, as these desires gradually fade away, our self also subsides and merges into the universe, leaving no trace of separate existence. In the state of nirvana, all sense of individual identity dissolves, and we become indistinguishable from the vast universe. The Buddha chose the term nirvana instead of other affirmative words because he realized that all affirmative words can evoke a sense of self-importance, illuminating the ego that must ultimately be liberated. Nirvana does not cause spiritual pollution because it cannot be tainted. It is the Part 2. The Buddha's Quest for Truth. When the Buddha was born, astrologers warned the king, "The gods are anxious that Your Majesty should know this. The prince who has just been born will either become a Chakravartin, a universal ruler, or he will become an ascetic monk. These are the two extremes." The king was aging when the prince was born, and this was his only heir. He requested the astrologers to find a way to prevent the child from becoming an ascetic and renouncing the world. These astrologers knew nothing about the mind and psychology. Perhaps they only knew about the stars far away, millions of light years from Earth, and how foolish humans are to believe that their fate, their destiny, is determined by the millions of stars far away. There is a reason for the meaningful existence of astrology. It gives you satisfaction to think that the entire universe cares about you. Even the stars far away are striving to do something for you. You are not ordinary. You are not nothing. The stars far away don't even know about you. They couldn't possibly, but your ego feels stroked. Astrologers have exploited this since the early days of humanity. Of course, they exploit you. You have to pay them, but somehow you feel deserving. They give you a big ego. You become grand, more important than the biggest star in the sky. They all revolve around you. But these poor astrologers are not even as clever as Sigmund Freud. They told the king, "If Your Majesty wants the prince not to renounce the world, the gods need to perform some rituals. In India, there are 3 distinct seasons in a year. Nowadays, this has changed. But before, every year on the same day, the rain would start, and also on a similar day, the rain would stop. In the winter, it arrives on the same day and ends 4 months later on a similar day. Throughout the centuries, the seasons unfolded this way. Nowadays, it has changed, but in the time of the Buddha, it was like this. The king father had 3 palaces built, each for a season. In the summer, the palace on the hilltop was always lush and beautiful. Every detail was meticulously arranged so that Prince Siddhartha never felt disappointed with this world. In the winter, a warm atmosphere enveloped the palace. The astrologers told the king, "From the outset, let the prince live among beautiful maidens, so that by the time he becomes a young man, the prince will have all the beautiful maidens of the country." They went even further into detail, saying that the prince should not see the elderly, for seeing the elderly would make the prince question, "Is this the fate of everyone?" Never let the prince see the dead. Absolutely do not let the prince know about the reality of life. Keep the prince in the idyllic fairyland. Their argument was that when one has everything, why would one want to renounce it, to resist it? The prince was cared for by the country's wise men. Even the gardeners in the palace were ordered that the prince should not see a flower about to wilt or a leaf about to change color. When night fell, anything signaling death had to be removed. The prince only saw beautiful, vibrant flowers. He only saw evergreen leaves, and the king could do this. The king ordered it to be done, and this method backfired. Those foolish astrologers did not realize a simple truth. If one has everything and does not recognize the ugliness around, sooner or later he will feel bored. Sooner or later he will start to think, is this all there is? Then tomorrow will be the same. The day after will not change. What's the point? He will become bored, and that's what happened. The prince became bored with the ever-beautiful maidens, with the ever-vibrant flowers. How long can your mind stay silent? It was the astrologers who caused the prince to renounce the palace. If he had been allowed to live a normal life like everyone else, perhaps there would have been no Buddha. To some extent, the astrologers unintentionally contributed greatly to humanity, unable to conceal the truth. Every year, the palace holds a festival, and Crown Prince Siddhartha, the heir to the throne, presides over and declares the opening of the festival. The festival lasts for several weeks with all sorts of sporting events and artistic performances. At the age of 29, Crown Prince Siddhartha stood up to declare the opening of this festival. On the way to the festival, every detail was meticulously arranged, yet existence always finds its way to reach you. You cannot remain completely closed like a tomb unless you are dead. If you are alive, there will surely be air vents for existence to seep in and make you aware of reality. Astrologers and kings cannot be smarter than existence. Every detail was meticulously arranged along the route from the palace to the festival venue. No elderly, no dead bodies, no funeral processions, anything that could make the prince suspicious. But you cannot avoid reality for long. As the carriage was heading towards the festival, the prince saw an old man. He was deaf and did not hear the prohibition order for that day, that he must stay indoors and not go out. The old man was deaf, unable to hear, so out of his daily habit he left the house to go to the market to buy food. For the first time in 29 years, the prince saw an old, decrepit man, someone on the threshold of death. The prince asked the coachman, "What is happening? What has happened to that man? I have never seen anything like this." The coachman loved the prince like his own son. He couldn't lie. Although this will go against the king's order, the deity cannot lie to the prince. Everyone tried everything so that the prince wouldn't see the old man. Everyone has to grow old. The deity will also grow old. This is the law of life. The prince then asked, "Does that mean one day I will also grow old like that man?" The coachman replied, "I beg the deity to be truthful. I hope this will not happen to the prince, but it is the law of life, and nothing can change it. Just as the prince grew from a child to a young man, then from a young man to an old man, and then someone died right there. Now you cannot prevent death. You cannot command death in a way like, you are not allowed to happen on this road, you may happen elsewhere. Death is not within your control. Someone dies, people cry, and the dead body lies there." The prince asked, "What happened? Why is everyone crying?" Crown Prince Siddhartha had never seen anyone cry, never seen tears shed by anyone, never seen a dead body. He asked, "What happened to this person? He isn't even breathing anymore." The coachman said, "This is the next stage. First, the prince sees the old man. Before long, death will come, and it has come for him." The prince asked, "So will I also die someday?" The coachman, though fearful of the king because he was an upright man, answered that, "The truth is the truth, and no one can deny it. Your Majesty will die, I will die, the prince will also die. Death begins on the day people are born. After being born, there is no escape from death." And at that moment they passed by a wanderer, a sannyasin. The astrologers had warned the king, "The prince must not associate with wanderers, for they are against everything. They teach that this world is an illusion, that all desires lead nowhere, that humans are only wasting their lives, and every passing moment brings death closer. We must avoid the wanderers." And for 29 years, Crown Prince Siddhartha had no idea that someone was striving to seek beyond life and death. The wanderer in the red-orange robe looked strange to the prince, who had never seen a wanderer in 29 years, must have been curious. He asked, "And what about this man? I have seen many people, but never anyone dressed like this, holding a bowl. Who is he?" The coachman replied, "This is someone who understands that beauty turns into ugliness, that youth turns into old age, that life turns into death, and he is trying to find out if there is anything eternal. Is there anything untouched by youth, old age, death, or disease? He is a wanderer. He has renounced the mundane world. He is seeking the truth." As they approached the festival venue, the prince ordered the coachman, "Turn back. I will not attend the festival of youth anymore. If youth ultimately turns into old age, sickness, death, and if this will happen to me, then I have wasted 29 years in vain. I have lived in dreams. I am no longer young, and I no longer want to be a prince. Tonight, I will renounce this world and seek the truth." What the astrologers told the king seemed like basic knowledge, but basic knowledge is shallow. They could not imagine one simple thing. No one can keep a person unaware of reality for a lifetime. It's best to let them know from the beginning, or it will be a great shock in their life. And it happened. That very night, Crown Prince Siddhartha left the palace renouncing everything. Part 3. The journey towards enlightenment. Consuming a tiny amount of food twice a month, he became emaciated like a skeleton. All the flesh vanished from his body and he appeared like a corpse. He became so weak that he could not move. Being one's own master. Finally, one day, while bathing in the Niranjana River near the Bodh Gaya monastery, the prince became so weak that he could not swim across the river. He fell down and believed that he was about to drown. It was the final moment, death knocking on the door. He was too feeble to cross. Suddenly, he grasped a branch and leaned on it, and for the first time he realized, if I am too weak to cross this small river in the summer when the water is almost dry like a tiny stream, then how can I cross the vast ocean of the world? What is to be done? Part 4. The Greatest Offering. Vipassana Meditation. The Buddha introduced a completely new concept of meditation to the world. Before the Buddha, meditation was something you had to do once or twice a day, an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening, and that was all. The Buddha brought a whole new understanding of the entire meditation process. He said that the kind of meditation you do for an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening, or maybe 4 or 5 times a day is not of much value. Meditation cannot be something you separate from life for an hour or 15 minutes. Meditation must be in harmony with life. It must be as natural as breathing. You cannot just breathe for an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening, because if you do, the evening will never come. It must be like breathing. Even when you sleep, you still breathe. You may be unconscious, but you continue to breathe. The Buddha said that meditation must be a continuous phenomenon. Only then can it transform you. And he introduced a new meditation technique. His greatest offering to the world was Vipassana. Vipassana is a Pali word, the language the Buddha commonly used to speak, because as a prince, he was taught Sanskrit, the language of literature. But when speaking, he never used this kind of language because it was the language of ascetics, intellectuals, not of the common people. Sanskrit has never been a language used for everyday life. It carries a unique quality compared to all other languages in the world. It is only used by intellectuals, scholars, and because of its incomprehensibility, the crowd finds it mystical. If translated, it is nothing special, even meaningless, but its sound is full of musicality. It possesses the most perfect structure among all languages in the world. But he decided to speak the language of the masses. It was a revolutionary step because the language of the crowd is not correct in terms of grammar. By being used, by ordinary people changing the sound, intonation, words became easier to use and less complicated. Pali is a simple language, and it is the language of innocent people, uneducated. Vipassana is their language. The literal meaning of this word is to see, and the metaphorical meaning is to perceive, to witness. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, chose a type of meditation called insight meditation. All other types of meditation are witnessing in various ways. Witnessing is an essential part of all types of meditation, unavoidable. The Buddha eliminated everything else and retained only the essential part, witnessing. Just observe and do not judge. There are 3 steps of witnessing. He started with the body because that's the easiest way. It's easy when you see your hands moving, your arms raising. You can see yourself walking on the road. You can see each step of yours. You can see yourself eating. So, the first step in Vipassana, the simplest step, is witnessing the body's actions. And when you witness the body's actions, you'll be surprised by that new experience. When you witness the movement of your hand with awareness, recognition, you'll feel the grace, charm, and even the tranquility in your hand. You can move your hand without witnessing. It will move faster, but without grace. The Buddha walked very slowly, so slow that he was asked many times why he walked so slowly. The Buddha replied, "This is part of meditation. Always walk as if you are walking in winter, entering a cold stream, very slowly, attentively, because the stream is very cold, cautious because its flow is very strong, witnessing each step because you might stumble upon stones under the stream. Observe the mind. The method remains the same, only the object changes with each step. The second step is seeing the mind. Now is the time you step into a more subtle world, seeing your thoughts. If you have seen the actions of your body, you will not encounter any difficulty. Thoughts are subtle waves, but they also exist just like the body. They are not invisible. Just as the air is not invisible, the air exists like stones. So do your thoughts. They exist and are not invisible. That is the second step, the intermediate step. You are heading towards the invisible, but it still exists, seeing your thoughts. There is only one condition. Do not judge. Do not judge because the moment judgment begins, you will no longer see. There is nothing wrong with judging. The reason it is prohibited is because the moment judgment begins, this is a positive thought. You will not witness anymore. You start thinking, you get involved. You cannot detach, cannot stand on the sidelines and just observe passers-by. Do not become a participant, whether through praise, evaluation, or condemnation. Have no attitude towards the things passing through your mind. You should see your thoughts as clouds drifting across the sky. Do not judge them, such as these dark clouds are ugly. Those white clouds look like wise houses. Clouds are clouds, neither good nor bad. Thoughts are the same, just small waves passing through your mind. Observe without judgment, and you will await a great surprise. When your seeing becomes stable, thoughts will diminish. If your witnessing is stable at 50%, then 50% of your thoughts will disappear. If your witnessing is stable at 60%, then only 40% of your thoughts remain. When you witness at 99%, only 1% of thoughts appear, but only for a moment then disappear, like a crowd passing by and then disappearing. Rush hour traffic is no more. When you reach 100%, that is, completely non-judgmental witnessing, it means you have become a mirror, because a mirror never judges. An ugly woman looks into the mirror does not judge. A beautiful woman looks into the mirror, it remains the same. When no one looks into the mirror, it still shines brightly as when it reflects someone. Whether reflecting or not, the mirror remains unchanged. Witnessing will become a mirror. This is the greatest achievement in meditation. You have come halfway, and this is the most difficult part. Now you know the secret, and this secret must be applied to various objects. Observe emotions and moods. From thoughts, you must transition to more subtle experiences such as emotions, feelings, and moods. From the mind to the heart, with the same condition, no judgment, just witnessing. And surprisingly, most of your emotions, feelings, and moods possess you. At this point, when feeling sad, you become sadness. You are consumed by sorrow. When you feel anger, it is not a partial feeling. You become fully enraged. Every cell in your body trembles with anger. Look into your heart. Experience when nothing owns you. Sadness comes and goes. You do not become melancholic. Joy comes and goes. You do not become joyful. Whatever moves into the deeper layers inside your heart does not affect you. For the first time, you taste something of enlightenment. You are no longer a slave subjected to someone else's sudden emotional outbursts. When witnessing the third step, for the first time, you become a master. Nothing can stir you. Nothing can overwhelm you. Everything remains distant, deep below, while you are at the peak. When you have completely witnessed your body, mind, and heart, you can do nothing else. Then you must wait. When these 3 steps are completed, the 4th step will unfold as a natural reward. It is a quantum leap from the heart to the essence, to the very core of existence. You must remember you cannot do that. It happens on its own. Do not try to accomplish it, because the harder you try, the more certain you will fail. It is inevitable. You prepare the 3 steps, and the 4th step is the reward from existence. It is a quantum leap. Suddenly, your source of life, your witnessing, dives deep into the essence. You have returned home. You may call it self-realization. You may call it enlightenment. You may call it ultimate freedom, but it is nothing more. You must seek to the utmost. You have found the truth of existence and the blissful state it brings through the veil of illusion surrounding you. Part 5. The Middle Way, Majjhima Nikaya, from the bottom rising to the surface. Decayed leaves floated on top. Thinking he couldn't bring that water for the Buddha to drink, Ananda returned. I cannot fetch that water for you, but do not worry. 4 more miles ahead, I know there is a large river, and I will fetch water from there for you. Although it is already dark, and you are thirsty again, I have no other choice. The Buddha replied, No, I want to drink water from that stream. You need not waste time. You should have brought water from there. But the water there is dirty and murky, with rotten leaves floating on the surface. How can I bring that water for you? The Buddha replied, Go and fetch it for me. When the master insisted, Ananda returned, but to his surprise, by then, the leaves had drifted away. The water kept flowing, carrying everything along, and the mud had settled down, leaving the water slightly murky. At this moment, arrived at the stream, I saw 2 carts coming down from the hilltop, and knowing when they would cross the stream, I asked you to fetch water at that moment. Son. Simply sit down beside the stream of your mind. Do nothing. No one expects anything from you. Just sit quietly, as if it doesn't concern you. What's happening in your mind is also happening elsewhere. The mind is not you. It belongs to someone else. You are just the observer. The Buddha called his entire philosophy Majjhima Nikaya. He believed in always staying in the middle. And you know that sunrise will come again because after the darkness comes the dawn. When pain is there, you're just the observer. You know the pain has come and sooner or later it will go. And when happiness comes, you know it won't last forever. Unhappiness is just lurking somewhere. It will soon emerge. You remain the observer. If you can observe without attachment and without being pushed back, you'll fall into the middle. And once the pendulum stops in the middle for the first time, you can see what the real world is like. While moving, you can't know what the world is. Your movement makes everything chaotic. Once there's no more movement, you can see the world. For the first time, you know what reality is. A still mind knows what reality is. A mind in motion cannot know that. Your mind is like a camera. You keep moving and taking pictures, but every image that appears becomes unclear because the camera needs to be still. If the camera isn't still, all the pictures are just a mess. Your consciousness keeps swinging from one extreme to another. Therefore, anything you know about reality is just a mess, a nightmare. Nothing leads to anything. Everything is topsy-turvy, incomplete. If you stand in the middle and the pendulum stops, if you concentrate your consciousness, then you'll know what reality is. Only a still mind understands what truth is. Part 6. Emptiness, Sunyata, in Buddhist philosophy. The entire religion of the Buddha can be described by a single word, and that is freedom. That's the core message of the Buddha, the essence of his fragrance. No one else raises freedom to such heights. That's the supreme value in the Buddha's vision, nothing higher than that. Perhaps it's necessary to understand why the Buddha emphasizes freedom so much. It's not God. It's not the path of meditation. It's not even love. It's only freedom. That's because all things of value can only happen in an environment of freedom. Love also flourishes on the soil of freedom. Without freedom, love cannot thrive. Without freedom, what you call love is nothing but physical desire. Without freedom, there's no God. Without freedom, the God you think of is just a product of your imagination, your fears, your greed. Without freedom, there's no meditation. Freedom is meditation itself. And if you think there's meditation without freedom, then that meditation is worthless. It's not real. It's just your illusion, your dream. All the great values in life develop in an environment of freedom, so freedom is the most fundamental and highest value. If you want to understand the Buddha, you must experience a little of the freedom he's talking about. Freedom doesn't come from the outside. It's not social, political, or economic. It's spiritual freedom. When the Buddha speaks of freedom, he means a state of consciousness unimpeded by cravings, unrestrained by greed, by wanting more. When the Buddha speaks of freedom, he means a consciousness without mind, a state of no mind. It's completely empty because anything contained within would hinder freedom, hence it must be absolutely empty. The term emptiness, sunyata, has been widely misunderstood. Whenever we hear the term emptiness, we often think of something negative. In the language of the Buddha, emptiness is not negative. On the contrary, it's very positive, more positive than what's called fulfillment because emptiness is filled with freedom, while other things have been removed. It's vast, expansive. All boundaries have been removed. It's unlimited, and only in the unlimited can freedom appear. The emptiness of the Buddha is not ordinary emptiness. It's not absence, but the presence of the invisible. For example, when you clean your room, when you remove clutter, pictures, and other objects from the room becomes empty because there's no more clutter, pictures, or objects. But on the other hand, the invisible begins to appear. That invisibility is vastness. The room becomes larger. When you remove clutter, the room becomes even larger. When everything has been removed, even the walls, the room becomes as vast as the sky. That's the whole process of meditation. Removing everything, removing yourself to the point of nothingness, not even you remaining. Within that absolute stillness is freedom. In that absolute stillness will appear the 1,000-petaled lotus of freedom and the fragrance of peace, of hidden love, of blessings. Part 7. The Greatness of the Buddha, Compassionate Consciousness. The emphasis on compassionate consciousness by the Buddha Shakyamuni, in addition to meditation, is a profoundly new phenomenon for previous mystics. The Buddha created a historical milestone. Before him, only meditation was enough. No one emphasized compassionate consciousness alongside meditation. The reason is that meditation brings enlightenment, blossoming, absolute existence. So what more do you need? Considering every human heart, meditation is sufficient. The greatness of the Buddha Shakyamuni encompasses even speaking of compassionate consciousness even before you begin meditation. You should love more, be more compassionate, empathize more. There is a scientific explanation for this. Before a person attains enlightenment, if they have a rich compassionate consciousness, it's highly likely that after meditation, they will help others attain blessings, stature, praise, similar to what they have achieved. The Buddha Shakyamuni made enlightenment a transformative process. But if one feels they have returned home, why bother others? For the first time, enlightenment became a non-selfish process. The Buddha turned it into a social responsibility. That's a great change. But humans must learn compassionate consciousness before enlightenment. Without learning compassionate consciousness before enlightenment, humans won't learn anything afterward. When humans are too absorbed in themselves, even compassionate consciousness becomes a hindrance to their own joy, causing a disruption that can affect their ecstatic state. That's why there are hundreds of people who attain enlightenment, but only a few become masters. You don't necessarily have to become a master when you attain enlightenment. Becoming a master means you have a rich, compassionate consciousness, and you feel ashamed to enjoy the full beauty of enlightenment alone. You want to help blind people find their way in the dark. Helping them becomes your joy, not a bother. In fact, you become even more excited when you see many others around you also emanating fragrance. You are no longer the only blooming tree in the forest. When the whole forest blooms with you, the joy will be multiplied 1,000-fold. Through your enlightenment, you have created a revolution for this world. The Buddha Shakyamuni not only attained enlightenment, but also initiated a revolution. His concern for the world, for humanity, was vast as the sky and sea. He taught his disciples that when meditating and feeling the stillness, a profound joy would begin to spread within you. Don't hold on to it for yourself. Give it to the whole world. And don't worry, because the more you give, the more you are likely to receive. Giving will have tremendous significance when you know that giving does not take anything away from you. On the contrary, it will multiply your experience. Those who have never known compassionate consciousness will not understand the secret of giving, will not know the secret of sharing. Once, one of the disciples of Buddha Shakyamuni, who was not a monk but devoted himself to Buddha, said, "I will do that, but I want an exception. I will give all my joy, all my meditation, and all my precious possessions inside me to this world, except for my neighbor, because he is truly despicable. Neighbors are always enemies." Buddha Shakyamuni said to the disciple, "Forget about the whole world, just give it to your neighbor." The disciple asked, "What are you talking about, Master?" The Buddha replied, Only when you can give it to your neighbor can you escape the attitude of hostility towards a fellow human being. The basic meaning of compassion is to accept the weaknesses of others, not to expect others to behave like saints. That's cruel because others won't be able to act like saints, so they won't meet your expectations, and they will lose their self-respect. You make them numb. You have destroyed their dignity. One of the most basic things about compassion is to make people feel valuable, to make people realize that what happened to you could happen to them, that they are not the only hopeless case, that they are not worthless, that enlightenment is not only for the deserving, but it is the inherent nature, the inherent identity of them. However, these words need to come from someone who has attained enlightenment. Only then will they make you believe. If spoken by scholars who have not attained enlightenment, they will not inspire trust. The words spoken by an enlightened person will begin to have their own rhythm. It becomes alive, going straight to your heart. It's no longer an intellectual discipline. But for scholars, it's different. The scholar himself is not sure about what he is saying, writing. He is uncertain just like you. Buddha Shakyamuni is a turning point in the revolution of consciousness. His contribution is great, infinite, and in his contribution, the idea of compassion plays the most crucial role. But remember that having compassion does not mean you stand above others. Otherwise, you will miss its entire meaning. It will become a journey of the ego. Remember not to embarrass someone by pitying them. Otherwise, behind every word full of pity from you is the humiliation of others. Compassion must be understood because it is mature love. Compassion is not a relationship. It's simply your essence. You like to express love for trees, for birds, for humans unconditionally, without expecting anything in return. Let me tell you an interesting story. Paddy came home earlier than usual and found his wife lying naked on the bed. When asked why, the beautiful wife said, "I'm protesting because I don't have nice clothes to wear." Paddy opened the wardrobe, looked inside, and then said, "That's absurd. There are yellow dresses, red dresses, floral dresses. There are suits. Hello, Bill. There's a green dress." This is compassion. This is compassion towards the wife, compassion towards Bill. No jealousy, no argument, just a simple, "Hello, Bill, how are you?" and continue counting. The husband didn't even bother to ask, "What are you doing in my wardrobe?" Compassion is the expression of someone who truly understands. It is the most delicate understanding of a human being. At an intersection, a man's car veered off and bumped into the back of the car in front with the words, "Just married." It was just a minor collision, but the man sincerely apologized to the newlyweds. "Oh, it's okay, just bad luck," the groom replied. Compassion is understanding that anything can happen. Once married, he is capable of accepting all kinds of accidents. The biggest accident has already happened, so there's nothing else to fear. Those with compassion will not be affected by the trivialities of life, by things that can happen at any time. Only then, indirectly, will your compassionate energy be accumulated, crystallized to become stronger and continue to flourish with meditation. Therefore, in the moment when blessings come, when you blend with the light, there will be at least one companion, compassion. And immediately, you will experience a new way of living. Be the light that illuminates yourself. The final words of Buddha, Vichkamau ni are, be the light that illuminates yourself. Don't follow others. Don't imitate others, because following, imitating will only create foolishness. You are born with boundless understanding. You are born with light within. Listen to the small voice, the silence within, and